Good morning. We're going to get underway. Let me start with the introductions of the board. I'm Stan Brezhnev, the chairman of the board, and Mike, if you would just start.
Michael Regan, good morning.
Stanley Richards, good morning.
Brian Hamill, good morning.
Bobby Cohn, good morning.
Jennifer Jones-Austin, good morning.
Derek Cephas.
I'm Martha King. I'm not on the board. I'm the executive director.
So the first item of business, of course, is the approval of May and June meeting minutes. I think we've all had an opportunity to review them.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to make some adjustments in the agenda as we go along because of scheduling exigencies that have developed. All of the items will be covered, but the order will be adjusted somewhat. We will begin with the update, nice to have finally after a long time without an update from the board executive director.
Thanks, Stan. I'm very pleased to be here at my first meeting as executive director with such a respected and committed and engaged group of board members. In general, I will have more updates, I'm sure, but currently I'm just on a listening tour among our staff and with all of our partners trying to reset a path forward for the board, which, as Stan mentioned, has not had leadership for some time. So my two brief updates are both good news. One is that the BOC downtown staff and offices are moving as early as next week, but certainly this month, to new space at 1 Center Street. And then my second update is that we thankfully got an increase in funding. This was after some years, and certainly the largest increase we've gotten in some years. So I want to thank the City Council and the Mayor for their recognition of the importance of the board, even in this time of reform. And the board members for their help and support in making the case for the board. And to our partners, especially Legal Aid and the Prisoners' Rights Project, that have publicly supported increase in capacity for the board. Thank you. Those are my updates. Hello, Steve.
The next item is musical chairs. And we're not even at full strength.
It's a chain reaction, Michael.
Sliding off.
So here's the first, well, I guess the first adjustment, we'll do the continuing variances and hold the updates for a bit. So if we could have the presentations from both DOH/MH and DOC on those continuing variances.
Good morning. So the department is requesting a continuing variance for the classification of commingling special category adolescents and sentenced detainees at RNDC. The personal hygiene, wearing suicide smocks and suicide blankets for those inmates that are on enhanced suicide observation, and also for the limited recreation for inmates confined to the communicable disease unit, and also the variance for commingling sentenced and detaining pregnant inmates at Roseland State.
Can I hear a motion on that?
Move to approve.
Or first, any questions on the variance?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you.
Good morning. There are 3 variances that we seek continuing renewal of. The first deals with the use of an interferon gamma release test for screening of tuberculosis on entry into the jail system. The second deals with the continuation of the variance to have stable patients in general population settings seen on a 28-day schedule by psychiatrists instead of 14 days. And this, just to remind everybody, is for patients that have been deemed to be stable in general population. And then the third deals with a request to continue the variance to share certain information around injuries to assist the Department of Correction in their investigation of injuries that occur to our patients in the jail setting.
Any questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. I'm going to defer until later on the reports from our committee on adolescent and young adult. As I say, they will be given very shortly, but I want to move to items 6 and 7. Before we do, though, a quick word. There have been many requests to speak to the petition of the Department of Correction and the request for an emergency variance. The requests specifically asked for an opportunity to speak before the board considered whether to initiate the process for rulemaking. Ordinarily and candidly, I would not have permitted public comment in the midst of a business meeting. And the fact that I'm doing so, that the board is doing so, is not in any way precedential. The process, the written correspondence, all designed to have substantial public involvement. But the issue and the phases of the development of the issue seem to me to warrant special handling this time. So despite the fact that it's highly unusual to do this in the midst of a meeting that, if the vote is affirmative, will merely start a process, in deference to the strongly held views and feelings, it was felt by the board that an opportunity to comment before we act, even on this what could be a first stage, was warranted. So with that in mind, and with a strong urging, even admonition, to keep these remarks focused on the issue at hand, namely the petition and the variance, and to keep the remarks succinct, pointed and brief, so that all of the business of the meeting can be transacted. A number of individuals have signed up. The first is Sarah Kerr.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Kerr. I'm a staff attorney with the Prisoners' Rights Project of the Legal Aid Society and a member of the Jails Action Coalition. Thank you for letting us speak before the vote today. Sorry I sat so far away. I didn't know it would come this quickly. Before I address why the board should not proceed with the department's attempt to roll back amendments made to the minimum standards in January, I want to briefly address the department's proposed amendment to Standard 1-03 concerning suicide prevention in the jails. The current DOC proposal lacks the necessary substance and consideration that this topic requires, and which the too frequent suicide deaths in our jails command. DOC's proposed amendments limit hygiene items and provide special clothing and bedding to persons on suicide watch. They omit some of the essential conditions this board imposed in granting the variance on the topic in 2003. For example, DOC left out the necessity that clinical staff be involved in the decision-making about whether to implement a suicide watch and what deprivations are required for maintaining the safety of a person who is on suicide watch. A group of advocates in New York City discussed suicide prevention and provided the board a preliminary assessment of the need to improve the minimum standards concerning the department's suicide prevention practices by letter yesterday. Based on our preliminary research, it is clear that DOC's proposed amendments on suicide prevention are grossly inadequate. We determined that the board should engage in rulemaking on suicide prevention. However, it should do so carefully, fully, and with the benefit of all that has been learned in the more than 2 decades since the mental health standards were written. Now let me briefly address the Legal Aid Society's position toward the rollback of the board's recently adopted standards on visiting packages and punitive segregation. When we were here in May and June, all appeared to agree that the DOC petition was deficient in its introductory form. At the last meeting, it was called a work in progress, and consensus appeared to be that it was too broad in its sweep away of rights, rights to contact visits, rights to receive packages from family and friends, and the right not to be tortured in punitive segregation. These 3 issues that are the subject of the DOC petition, visiting, punitive segregation, and the right to receive packages from family and friends, were just decided by this board in January and should not be revisited based on no new evidence, no changed circumstances, and no persuasive data. The board correctly did not vote on this DOC petition in May or in June while it waited to hear supportive facts and to see appropriate limitations on the demands. Demands for increased restrictions on the few liberties that individuals in our jails are afforded. Here we are in July. Yet there are still no facts that support the implementation of the sweeping restrictions sought in the department's petition. And despite the admonitions and the seeming agreement by the department that the language in the petition is too broad, there has been no amendment, no alteration to language, or limitation to the reach of the terms of the petition. The board must not enter rulemaking under these circumstances. Consider that they are asking you, for example, to give up your authority to decide visit appeals. They are telling you it is okay to do so because you will have the opportunity to talk to us. Well, you've been talking to them for 60+ days about tailoring their petition. It got you nowhere. The board must not enter rulemaking under these circumstances. Prior deliberations and process in January that resulted in new standards should not be unsettled without supportive data and proposed changes that are shown to be evidence-based best practices that will resolve the root causes of problems in our jails. There must be finality and substance to adopted rules. The process must have meaning. The department has been given time, yet the petition has not been changed. It contains no basis for the rollbacks requested. The board should vote no on the emergency variance and the proposed rollback. It should vote yes on considering old variances and creating modern standards on suicide prevention. I find it's interesting that we're trying to change the variances that have been in place for so long, which isn't what variants are supposed to be, yet at the same time the department is trying to use the variance process in a way that it's not designed to be used. Please remember that your decisions made here about minimum standards affect real people. I know my time's up. The individuals in our jails deserve better. We all deserve better. We deserve decisions about our jails that are grounded on substantial fact, demonstration of need, and evidence that the proposal will effectuate positive change. Thank you, and happy Bastille Day.
Yes, it is, Mastio. Thank you. I noted on the list that we have some elected officials with us today. Welcome. And I'm going to call on one next. Daniel Drum, City Council.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I want to state right from the start that my position today is supported in a letter that I sent to the members of the board by at least 10 council members, and we were able to gather those signatures in about a day in July when a lot of people are on vacation. And had I had a little more time, I probably would have had a number of other signatures on there as well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I want to take a moment to recognize Martha King, the board's new executive director, and Stanley Richards, the newest member to join the board. I look forward to working with you for many years to come. I'm here today to encourage you to continue your efforts to reform our city's jails. As such, I discourage you from approving any requests that do not advance meaningful reform. The Department of Correction is asking you to initiate rulemaking around visitation policy and to improve an emergency variance that will essentially roll back punitive segregation reforms that this board recently approved. I object to both DOC proposals for essentially the same reason. Without robust supporting evidence, this board should not approve the requested changes. After reading the DOC's proposals, I have a host of questions and concerns, and I am sure the board does as well. The DOC's proposals concerning visitation policy will effectively deter visitation. Where is the evidence that contact visits that include human touch are the source of contraband? Where is the evidence that visitation increases violence directed at staff? Where are the studies and analysis? Similar questions arise from the DOC's proposal around packages. Individuals in jails are often the poorest of the poor, unable to afford even modest bail. Curbing the sending of packages from home and instead requiring purchase from a pre-approved service will mean that most individuals will go without. If the board pursues rulemaking, the DOC's approach should be avoided unless there is strong evidence supporting it. From the mental health and reentry experts I have discussed this with, visitation policy should seek to increase visitation and maintain relationships that are so vital for individuals preparing to reenter society. The emergency variance also lacks any basis in factual observation besides the two anecdotes offered by the DOC. Such a serious rollback of the reforms pursued by the board deserves much closer scrutiny and deliberation. For both experts and those who have experienced it firsthand, extreme isolated confinement does not work. The DOC should not place anybody in a situation that internationally recognized experts liken to torture. If anything, the rules should be strengthened by reducing the maximum length to 15 days. The questions this board should be asking are therefore, why is anyone being placed for 30 days at a time to begin with? How would eliminating the 7-day reprieve period after a 30-day stay actually lessen violence and brutality? Why are possible alternatives such as enhanced supervision housing insufficient now? Has the DOC tried evidence-based approaches that have less severe permanent mental health consequences? What mechanisms are in place to ensure the process will not be abused? Reform, which is so desperately needed, cannot happen without evidence evincing a positive impact in de-escalating violence while respecting rights. I therefore ask you that not to approve the DOC's requests. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Parrish.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Jennifer Parrish. I'm a member of the New York City Jails Action Coalition, and I work at the Urban Justice Center's Mental Health Project. I urge you to reject the variance request. The board should not turn away from the progress made toward ending the torture of solitary confinement. The 7-day release period was put in place to ameliorate the harmful effects of isolation. This break does not come until the person has already been in solitary confinement for 30 days, twice the limit proposed by the United Nations. The Vera Institute of Justice identifies as a misconception the view that segregation deters misbehavior and violence. The board should not allow DOC to continue the lengthy periods of isolation without any break from those conditions. Undoubtedly, the individuals who will be subjected to this exception will be those whom DOC makes an exception to the 60-day limit for 6 months, potentially subjecting these individuals to indefinite isolation. The board has already given DOC a tool to use in these instances, the Enhanced Supervision Housing Unit, ESHU. The initial justification for this restrictive unit was to address those who are identified as most violent. In fact, the Department of Corrections cited those released from punitive segregation as candidates for ESHU. Now the board asks you to go beyond that request, leave the ESHU in place, and allow them, at their discretion, to make exceptions for the 7-day release period. You should not approve this request. I also urge you to vote against beginning the rulemaking process to roll back the minimum standards for visits, packages, and punitive segregation. The Jails Action Coalition has submitted 2 letters describing the reasons that we oppose these proposed rules. Without time to review those now, I will focus on the larger picture of the operation of this board and to question whether this board intends to be an outside monitor that sets standards for the Department of Correction, monitors performance, and requires compliance, or whether this board is going to continue in the pattern begun with the rush for the ESHU rulemaking process and roll back standards which are in place to protect the most basic rights of incarcerated individuals. This board has been collecting information and reporting on weapons in the jails, ESHU utilization, and punitive segregation compliance. And all of the information before you contradicts DOC's assertion that rulemaking is necessary. Most contraband doesn't enter the jails through outsiders, either COs, staff, or visitors. Individuals released from punitive segregation are not being placed in ESHU and then engaging in assaultive behavior that results in their return to solitary confinement. And DOC is not proactively reporting to the board when individuals are kept in punitive segregation beyond the current limits, as the rules require. I urge you to assert your independence from the department and from the administration, and to only undertake rulemaking when you are satisfied by the evidence of the need to change the rules. Please vote against beginning the process to weaken the minimum standards today. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelsey Davila.
Good morning. My name is Kelsey Davila. I'm a social worker with Brooklyn Defender Services. I'm also a member of the Visit Working Group, along with Jeff, the DOC Chief of Staff, and Stanley Richards. First off, I'd like to say that I'm grateful for the opportunity to be part of the working group. We've been able to meet twice so far, not including an afternoon where we were able to tour the Central Visit Building and RNDC's visit facility. In the short amount of time between our first meeting and today's vote, we've been able to identify several areas of concern and recommendations for change. I'm hopeful that what will come from this group, and I'm confident that as a collaborative team, we can really make visits easier and much more accessible to families who visit from all over the city. With that said, I'm apprehensive about today's vote when this working group has only just begun and there are so many questions still unanswered and there are so many topics that have yet to be covered. The purpose of this working group is to address the process and treatment families are experiencing and to make the visit overall welcoming experience. We need to encourage families to visit, and the current proposal is doing the exact opposite and harming any kind of relationship that exists between the incarcerated individual and their loved one. We cannot forget that many people incarcerated on Rikers Island are being held because they simply don't have enough money. And the idea that people will only receive packages through pre-approved vendors where friends and family would have to pay would discourage any kind of involvement and would be an added financial hardship that families don't need. As part of the Visit Working Group and Jails Action Coalition, we have yet to see this pre-approved vendor list and even the suggested prices for items. As of right now, we don't know the potential financial impact this would have on families. That kind of information needs to be shared, and families have a right to know, especially when it's going to have a deep strain in their pockets. This proposal is a response to decrease violence and decrease the potential for illegal trafficking, but we have to look at the reports that are already in front of us. To quote the 2014 BOC report, Most of the weapons found in 2014 were inmate-made or improvised using materials commonly found in the jail environment, such as metal from radiators, plastic from light fixtures, and wood from broomsticks. As part of the visit working group, we're still trying to get clear data, that we could identify kinds of contraband being brought in, how it is being caught within the flow of the visiting process, and what facility. How effective can any of us be, or how can this proposal be justified without any persuasive data? Families are being treated through a militarized approach. Less than 2 weeks ago, EOC was outside the Central Visit Building. There were close to 20 officers in bulletproof vests, and in addition, there was a canine unit. Officers came onto the Q100, the city bus, and asked all staff to get off first. All visitors had to stay on, where they were then escorted to the visit building and were met with a canine unit. Visitors had to line in a single file where they were searched before even reaching the amnesty box that's available for visitors to place any kind of contraband before entering the building. I have not gotten a clear answer if this was a one-time event or if this happens to families regularly. But in the end, families should never be treated in the ways that I witnessed that afternoon. I myself went for a visit about a week ago and couldn't make it through the first metal detector. It beeped twice, and then I had to go to a separate room for a pat frisk. The officer did not introduce herself, nor did she explain the protocol that would have to be used during the pat frisk. I had read the expectation and heard it from the captains during our visit tour, yet what was on paper were two different things. No one's hand should be going inside your bra, and you should not have to be opening your pants for anyone to look inside. Those acts can have devastating and triggering effects for people who have a history of abuse and sexual assault. The practices are done to families need to be addressed, and that's why this visit committee is so important in this process. There are changes that could be done now, internal procedural changes first before any kind of serious restrictions and increased financial burdens are placed on families. We cannot use cities like Los Angeles as an example of having non-contact visits. This is not in the right direction for New York City, and honestly, having non-contact visits, not being able to touch throughout a visit, hug and kiss, actions that many of us take for granted on a daily basis, is only going to increase the violence. There is a lot of work that needs to be done, but this proposal to restrict visitors' rights is not the direction that we need to be going in. Again, I urge the board to not accept this proposal and instead support the work that comes out of the visit committee, because we truly believe that we can make the visiting process easier, more family-oriented and supportive, and overall have a positive impact on visits for the thousands incarcerated on Rikers Island. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz Mayer.
Hello, I'm not Liz Myers, I'm Nicole Jelliker. I'm taking her place. Thank you, Liz. I'm a legal intern at the Urban Justice Center Mental Health Project. Just a little bit of background on me so that you know this statement isn't something I'm doing just because I'm a legal intern. I was an undergraduate major in criminology and psychology, and I decided through my internships that there were too many cracks in the system with the people that I worked with, and I felt they were falling through. And I felt that becoming a law student and then eventually a lawyer, I could advocate for them and effectively help them. And I hope that this statement is a first step in doing that. I went to Rikers and I got a statement from someone named Robert Rivera, who has spent a large amount of time in solitary confinement, and I would like to read that to you. So hopefully you can understand the effects that solitary confinement has both mentally and physically. So Robert Rivera's statement is, I am 26 years old and I am from Brooklyn. I am Trinidadian and Puerto Rican. Now it is just my father and I. My mother passed when I was in jail in 2007. Who I really am is a loving father of a 2-year-old son, a funny man, a respectful person, and easy to get along with. I love to read books all day and work out. However, since being in the box, I struggle with what I describe as the monster inside of me. It's best described as aggressiveness. I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. I don't feel like that is the right diagnosis. At times, I feel okay, but then at other times, I feel like I'm a different person. My friends have told me that I'm a different person. I requested to see the psych several weeks ago, but I still haven't seen them. I'm not currently on medication for my mental illness. I've been in the box several times, in state prison and at Rikers. I spent 10 days in the box at Rikers in the last year. I think it is worse than the conditions upstate. It is more humid. It is very hard to sit inside, especially for a person like me. It is more dirty, the floors are very dirty, and the cell is not cleaned as often. But all the other conditions are the same that I described. No one finds the box to be fun. The box is the box. It's designed to break people. I did most of my bit in the box. Once you go in once, you come out feeling like you could do it again. What I mean by this is that I know what to expect now. There's nothing I don't know about it. There's nothing that didn't already bother me. So I go in knowing the conditions, mental and physical. When you come out, it's hard to interact with others again. It's a mental thing inside the box. Emotionally, it breaks you down. Not all the time, but definitely there are days when you feel it. There's so much negative thinking. I did not expect this from the box. I didn't expect it to change me. I had not heard of others' experiences. I had kept myself isolated. I wanted to watch people before I interacted with them. When you are in the box, you're caged like a dog. You can't walk more than 2 or 3 steps. You can't walk around. You lay on your bed, there's a desk, but who wants to sit on a hard desk all day? I read lots of books to keep busy, or I work out until I'm tired. There's nothing else to do but think. You're so alone, you start to think about preventing what you've done in the past, what your family is doing now. I'm not saying I don't want to think about my family, but it's different in the box. In general population, you have phones, you have visitation, and you have your homeboys. Your homeboys might know someone who knows your family. You have access to the libraries. You have access to rec. Not the rec in the box where you are in a cage, handcuffed, where I sit or I stand. I am caged in like a dog. I feel like I'm different from everyone outside the box. I'm made to feel like a monster. When I was in the box, I lost weight. There's a small amount of food. You can go in 210 pounds and come out 190. I have stretch marks on me now. It's very humid. The water's no good. It's hard to write your family to let them know where you are. You're supposed to get stamps, but that doesn't always happen. Then your family is not aware of where you are. Mine went to jail to visit me, and I wasn't there. Then they were harassed. They shouldn't be the ones harassed. They're not the ones here. I am. There's a problem with the medical treatment in the box. It takes so long for the site. It's a medical issue. They don't see it that way. It should be an emergency. I felt the symptoms were worsened in the box. I would have to tell an officer, and it's up to him to tell another, who tells another, and that's how it gets to the site. The problem is, the officer that I tell sees me physically and says I'm fine. He can't see anything physically wrong with me, so I'm fine. I bunked with another inmate upstate. There's colliding. Try going to the bathroom in front of another man, or taking a shower. We were harassed and ticketed for putting up a sheet for taking a shower. There are a lot of fights. I get aggressive because of what the other person does affects me. If that person gets in trouble, I get in trouble too. There is constant harassment, and the point is, enough is enough. Try living in my shoes, we all make mistakes. I think the rule requiring 7 days out of the box before going back in is an important reform. The 7 days is a big factor in helping with your mental stability. I feel without the 7 days out of the box before going back in, I would bug out. I'm going through a mental illness right now. The 7 days is a big factor in helping you in your mental illness. It gives you a peace of mind. So much in the box is by yourself. It's an unexplained feeling. Sometimes you have a sense of how long you will be in the box because the CO has told you, but other times you have to ask around. But there is a sense of time for me when I'm in the box. You're psyched out in the box. You're a dog in a cage. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder if you could leave a copy with us. Or
Yes,
give
I
us the
have
opportunity
several
first.
copies.
Copy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Tanya Kropet. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
Thank you.
I guess not. Okay. James Stanich. I may Stanek.
Good morning, I'm Jane Stanicky, Our Children and JAC. A couple of comments about visitation, which you've already heard about this morning. This is a specific example. Last week, a grandmother brought a 3-year-old to visit his mother, who's been a singer for 3.5 years. They can only afford to come visit once a year. The usual 2.5-hour wait for the 3-year-old before they could start their visit. And the grandmother was extremely concerned because they're consistently treated with open hostility by the officers. So in order to be succinct, I just have one question. Why on earth would we subject a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 14-year-old to a period during a visit where they cannot touch their parent? Thank you.
Thank you. Evie Litwok.
Good morning. My name is Evie Litwok. I'm formerly incarcerated and a member of JAC. I want to thank you for the opportunity of speaking, and I want to thank Commissioner Pont for meeting with JAC as he did last week. I'm going to urge you to vote against considering these petitions and to give time to think about it. My reasons are going to be coming again from someone who's been incarcerated. For months, I have been coming to meetings and listening to the amount of time, energy, and money being spent on millions of dollars on detainees who represent less than 100 people, less than about 1% of the population in Rikers. And it's disturbing to me, whether it's ESHU or 22 people who are a problem. We have spent all of our time focusing on, let's call it the 1%, and what I consider these proposals to be are 1% solutions, which aren't really solutions. There are close to 10,000 people at Rikers, and ESHU visitation packages are focused on countless people who present problems, but they're not focused on 99% of those people who do not present a problem. When I was in prison, and we had roughly 100 women in the unit, we had 2 luxuries, TV and microwave. If one person didn't stand up for count or had a fight, whatever was the reason, it was policy just for us to lose one or both of those luxuries on a regular basis. It didn't change the behavior of the one person who wouldn't stand up for count the next day, just as putting someone in solitary doesn't change the behavior. We spoke about the person who's been in solitary numerous times, who lights fires, and that behavior can't get controlled. So what we're essentially doing is repackaging policies for the same troubled population in different forms to prevent the same things over and over again, and it's not working. And meanwhile, the 99% who are obeying are getting nothing proactive because there's no time to spend on them. We understand the concept of 1% controlling things very well in this culture. We understand it as it comes to income equality, we understand it here, and we seem to do it as a country as a pattern. We don't have any models in this country to follow. We are using the same things. So I suggest we look to Spain, who 10 years ago stopped criminalizing drugs and started putting people into rehab programs. They also, 10 years ago, adopted same-sex marriage. The country is not blown up, as far as I know. I think it's pretty good. I think if we have to look somewhere else, let's look to Spain. Each time we rule in favor of the 1%, we hurt the 99% as a consequence. The problem with doing the same thing over and over again and calling it visitation or ESHU, it's simply safety, the problem with a few people, and controlling them. We label it differently, but we're repackaging. My suggestion is there are no models for us to try. Not Connecticut, not anywhere. There's no models, because everybody else is doing the same thing, repackaging. Video conferencing is another inhumane thing that we'll deal with in the future to limit contact. That's not a solution. We're in New York. we can come up with something different. We can set the stage for something different. We can do something to let the 99% thrive, grow, and not face what I face out here, which is a lot of pain every single day. Please vote against starting this process and reconsider getting an alternative for the problem people and being proactive for those that don't cause a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes the petition-related public comment period. And I will ask the Department of Correction to present their petition and variance request.
Yeah. Have you had a meeting? No, because
Good morning, everyone. So we have some slides. We'll run through the slides and obviously answer any questions the board has. So our petition to start the rulemaking really goes back to the work that's been done in the last year in our agency. We've implemented or started to implement a 14-point agenda, anti-violence agenda in the agency. Many of these rules we'll talk about today are a piece of that strategy, not conclusive of the strategy. It's not a single piece that will make the agency work. It is really how all these pieces come together to make the agency safer. These proposed rule changes are not the sole solutions to stopping contraband and reducing violence, but they are a piece of that. We've had much dialogue about how contraband enters our jail system. We'll continue that dialogue. In some cases, it's going to be very difficult for any of us to get the concrete on the reality of it. But it is a complex problem, and we hope to have continued discussions about it. Key pieces that work in conjunction with other pieces in our plan to improve our housing and classification, improve programming, and redefining first-line responses. So as the speaker prior talked about the rest of the population, so a lot of these areas are focused on inmates that are causing problems, but we do have solutions in our 14-point plan for those that are not. The comprehensive internal review that we've done really outlines some very deep-seated problems in the agency. In the past decade, the inmate population has shifted, so those lesser nonviolent offenders are not in custody. Those that left in custody are more violent, more serious charges. Inmates who stay with us overnight will stay with us approximately 176 days, which is contrary to normal, and we've said these things about 53 days of average length of stay, which is inherently not correct. Also in our plan, we had to look at our true staffing needs, both from numbers and types. So we've done a much better job training, recruiting, and onboarding our staff than ever before, realizing that the officer of 5 or 10 years ago is not the needs of the officer today. So we're doing a much better job in that regard. Supply distribution, making sure that we can deliver the necessary requirements to our inmates. Somebody was mentioning the physical conditioning of housing units, also a major concern of ours. Current housing and classification system is basically ineffective. It was not a predictor of violence or a good predictor of who could be housed together. We've now begun a project at GMDC to test that tool out and be rolling that out to GRVC in August. So I think we're on the right road of how to identify and house these offenders. We also what we learned in our survey was that while much of our staff understood core correctional principles, adhering to those principles was a continued problem in the agency. So the next slide really just points out what is the 14-point plan, and then the slide after that is more important. It tells how we believe the 14-point plan intersects with the areas of concern. And so the staff survey, number one concern was safety. Many of the things we'll talk about today attempts to address that safety concern. So the department is engaged in reforms that are meaningful and lasting. So we're not trying to sugarcoat the problem. We're not trying to paint something as less than what it is. We took the bold step last year, eliminated punitive seg prior to a rule change for 16 and 17-year-olds in record time. So agencies that have gone down this route, and typically juvenile justice agencies, have taken anywhere from 5 to 10 years. We took this bold step in mere months, and are still looking to improve that situation. But it was something that we took on ourselves, not something that was forced on us by lawsuits, something that the agency took as a need to really set the tone for how do we manage young offenders here in the city of New York. We've increased programming and access to education. We've increased staff inmate ratios to 1 to 15. All proposals that we proposed, not something that was forced on us. We've also looked at alternatives to punitive seg and our second chance and true housing with our adolescent population. We have on the table a plan to eliminate punitive seg for 18 to 21-year-olds by 2016. Again, significant in the fact that no other adult correctional agency in the country is even talking about this, let alone having a plan on how to do it. So I think when people talk about rolling back reforms, they're not talking about this correctional agency. We're taking on tasks that are much farther out than any agency in the country. So we've also identified and rolled out models that I think are probably nationally recognized, our CAPS and PACE models. Very effective, a great way, a great improvement on our treatment of mentally ill offenders. We've just started our training on our crisis intervention teams, something we reported to the board that we would do, and enhanced training and focus on the mentally ill and de-escalation. So again, the officers of today, so when we look at, and I mentioned this before at prior meetings, you know, if you looked at the recruitment flyer for correction officers, it says nothing about working with mentally ill offenders. So we need to make sure that as we hire people, we select and train them for the task at hand. Corrections has changed a great deal in the last 10 or 15 years. So, you know, we're still engaged in meaningful reform. You know, our reforms to punitive segregation, and we'll show a chart on the next slide, but really for a 30-day maximum stay was down from the 90-day with no limit. So it was 30 days with a top limit of 60 in 6 months. You know, prior to that, it was a 90-day no top limit. And as the board knows, we had people ending thousands of days of punitive seg with no break. We also have a 3-tier approach to punitive seg, unusual nationally. Not many systems have this. So we have punitive seg, as we all know and talked about, for the more violent offenders. We also have punitive seg 2 for those less serious offenders, which is a 7-hour out of cell time. And then we have the typical restrictions, non-punitive seg sanctions to help correct behavior. We've reduced our punitive seg backlog, which was about 1,100 to about 700 today. So I think we've shown good work and good improvement in the area of punitive segregation. And we also, it's not on here, but one of the things the board was working on prior to me arriving was eliminating the historic time. So guys that would get out and come back, that has all been eliminated. Nobody's doing historic time any longer in the city of New York. So I think as we look at an agency that's really attempting to progress and do stuff that no other system in the country is doing, as we offer these changes, I think they're in some cases, as we've had dialogue, they are in fact stopgaps to how do we move forward to do better, but I believe at this point they are necessary. We've also centralized the review of punitive seg. We've created an office under an assistant chief to review the housing and the maintaining of those inmates that are in punitive seg, and also the rehousing as they get released. So we talk about kind of what we've done in the city of New York, but again, I compare us to any large-scale system in the country. The slide you see up here now talks about, you know, what other systems are doing. We have the, in conjunction with Vermont, which is a small state system, which also runs jails. You know, we're the only other system in the country that has a 30-day limit. We are the only system in the country that has a 7-day break between sentences and a 60-day limit in 6 months. As you see across the board, nobody else has done that. So I think one is pretty progressive. It's pretty kind of reaching out there, trying new stuff. And as we go through this process, part of what we need to do, as speaking with many of you, is that what do we do in order to reduce even more reliance on punitive seg in a way that's safe for both staff and offenders. So the measures against contraband by staff. So we always have this conversation about, you know, well, you know, you're increasing restrictions on visitation, but what are you doing about staff? So we now have an AIU contingent that does all of our applicant investigations. We've tripled the size of that unit. We've had automatic disqualifiers, so the people coming in the door, staff coming in the door at a much different level than we saw before. We also have steady staff at front gate. So we vetted, meaning we've looked at the backgrounds of staff assigned to front gate duty. They'll become part of what we call SOD, which will eventually allow them to be assigned any jail in the complex. So they will not be focused. They wouldn't have been appointed by that jail and be responsible there. We've also added our internal investigation units, our internal affairs, to 3 of our jails full-time. And we've expanded our ICOs to 3 facilities, one including Rosie. So, you know, we've added K-9 units to our ID. We'll add 5 or 6 K-9 units full-time. We have 1 full-time. Their job is to detect staff in the introduction of contraband into our facility. So I think we've done a lot. We've increased the training of our front gate staff. We've steadied the post. So it's as we look at other ways contraband come into the jail, I think we have had a reasonable strong focus on staff prevention. The next chart just talks about incidents across the board in a couple of our facilities, looking back 7 months and areas where we've shown good improvement. Everybody, if you don't know, RNDC is our adolescent facility, and you can see back in October of, December of 14, which is about where we eliminated punitive seg, how many incidents we were having, and how the facility has really handled that over the last several months. GRBC, another facility which will be a target of many of our reforms beginning in August, has done a great job under the leadership of Warden Augusta. So those are just some examples of what we've done now as an agency, and it's not basically just focused on a few problem inmates. The proposed rules are key, but a small piece of the overall reform. The agenda is aggressive while balancing what is possible now and what will be possible in the future as we build internal capabilities. As I said, many of these pieces are stopgap safety issues in order for us to get together to plan something that doesn't exist anywhere. So we've heard talk about how do we get punitive seg to 15 days. We've heard people talk about what do we do with somebody while they're in punitive seg so they don't repeat. So we're open to those conversations, but in the meantime, we need to run safe facilities. And again, there's no other state agency that I'm aware of that has those kinds of plans, even in discussion, let alone on the drawing board. These proposed changes fit in our overall reform agenda and necessary to change the culture of the organization. Staff safety is our primary goal, and without staff safety, we don't have inmate safety, we don't have programs. So we need to have a safe organization for people to work in. The department also has a legal duty to protect, meaning that if we know there's a dangerous situation, be it violence by inmates, physical plant dangers, we have a legal obligation to take action. What we're asking in our route change is the ability to do that. First, I want to talk briefly about the 7-day variance. This is the override for inmates out of segregation for 7 days. Our ability to rehouse them back into the seg when they commit a violent act. So we've talked about that. We've talked about how many inmates would that rule be available to in the course of a year. And I think the numbers we had talked about was 28 to 30 in that range. So a very small number, but clearly a population that requires some level of custody higher than we can deliver. ESH is not an option, and sometimes they would have assaulted an officer in the ESH. So at this moment in time, the options that we have to keep staff the safest would be to put them back in cumulative seg. As we have more dialogue and talk about what do we do and how long is that and what's the program on these types of inmates that are causing a lot of the repeated violence, those are open discussions. But in the meantime, we do need to take action for this very small group of inmates. We've talked about the need to protect staff and inmates because obviously some of the violence is on staff and also on other inmates. It's also the same logic that we use on the 60-day override option. Very limited applicabilities, very limited narrow look at who, so it's not an assault on staff, it is a very serious assault on staff. And I really feel compelled, without other options, that we need to do something that limits those inmates' ability to continue to do harm. So that's why I believe and support the need for the rule change, the variance on the 7 days. So we'll talk a little bit about the rule changes that we're requesting on visitation. I believe, and I've talked to many members of the board and some of our advocates in the audience, that we strongly support visitation. You know, our willingness, and we've talked about this, to have a visitation committee to improve the quality and standards of visits in our agency. I don't know in the past 10 years if we've done anything like that, where we got a lot of people at the table. How do we do this better and have a better experience? But for us, how do we do it safely and still allow a better visiting opportunity? So what we're asking for in the way of visiting is to really place the inmate and visitor in a physical environment that would allow us a better opportunity to observe the passing of contraband. So some people have talked about the holding of children. We've already stated and have a willingness to state that that would not be a prohibition in the visiting situation as we've talked about. We also want to look at who's coming to visit. So I don't know another system in the country that would allow people to come in to visit having no knowledge of who they are and the reason for the visitation. That's historically a way to look at people that are continuing criminal activity while they're incarcerated. So it's important for us, and again, part of our dialogue here will be, what is that look, what does it mean, and who would possibly exclude it? Some of the discussions we've had already, and we'll continue to have as hopefully these rules get put into the hearing process. The other rule is again, part of the visitation is clearly just the preventing of passing of contraband. You know, we have, any day we have visiting, on average, we have at least one visitor arrested. Every day of the week when we have visitation. So it's not an argument for me to say, are more drugs and weapons coming in through visitors, or is that stuff coming in through staff? So we're really trying to look at both venues and provide a better screening process for both, not just one. I think the next slide, we have the table that we talked about. Again, a very short divider, about 6 inches of plexiglass that really only would give us better observation if somebody was to pass something between the two. It does not prohibit, meaning if people wanted to, they could easily reach across and touch. The next issue for us is our package, third vendor package. I think as at least the board knows, you know, we're going into in the next couple months, which is about a year late, full uniforming of our inmates. Our inmates will have clothing issued, so the need for them to get clothing from home would be pretty limited. And again, most of our population, half our population turns over in 7 days. So again, the complex problem of bringing anything like property into the facility is both a concern for contraband. It's an aggravation for visitors to bring in. For those of you on the visiting committee, you'll see that as people come in, and something that we look at and say that's red or blue or that design's wrong is a constant problem. I think packages from a third-party vendor clarifies that for everybody. Also, at the same time, I think while we do have concerns about the economic situation of our families and friends, we believe the need for inmates to purchase some of their own clothing will be much less after the uniforms than currently is in place. I know we had conversations about books and those kinds of things and how to, so I believe we can overcome a lot of those kinds of things and not put an overly due burden, and at the same time provide better security. We've talked about tablets and emails. Well, great, because it reduces letters coming in the mail, reduces the opportunity for contraband, but actually improves in both speed and ability and cost for people to communicate. So there's a lot of technology out there today that wasn't out there before. ESH due process, I think that's kind of straightforward and speaks for itself, where an inmate was in ESH and left in a short period of time, our ability to put them back without a hearing, given the fact that they've been already cleared for that housing assignment prior. The assault on staff resulting in serious injury, this is an exception, not unusual in a lot of jurisdictions. Assault on law enforcement carries a higher penalty. We've asked in the rule to increase that to 60 days. Again, we've left most of the I think as the advocates have pointed out, we have left most of the rules as we had talked about them, knowing that we would be in active dialogue over the next couple months to really have a conversation about not only, I think what I like about the advocacy and the board, our ability to look at the problem from both sides. So we want safe, humane facilities. Facilities have to be safe for staff and inmates. So how do we work on something that works for all of us? And so serious assaults on staff is something that we need to get control of. We need to reduce those incidents, and we need our staff to feel safer in the facilities that work in. The 7-day override, we believe that was for those inmates that violently infracted in 7 days of being out. We believe, again, that was an oversight at the time, and it makes sense. As we talked about, we have other options and develop other programs on how do we safely manage somebody in these circumstances. I think those are all open discussions. In the meantime, it is our most safe and secure option that we currently have available to us. You know, we've talked to many people over the last several months about these rules, other rules. We've talked about kind of an open discussion of how do we do visits and how do we make things work better both for the city of New York and those people committed to our care. We'll continue to have that open dialogue. I think I'm very comfortable and confident that if we look at the problem from all sides, meaning that we need to lack safety and, for our jails and our staff and the offenders treated there, we can come up with solutions that really work for everyone. There are no, I think somebody said this already, there are not a lot of jail systems out there that are anywhere near approaching the things that we're doing. So some of us are going to have to figure it out on our own. Some of us is going to be trial and error of how to make this system better and safer for all. So again, I heard your concerns. We'll continue to have open dialogue and open discussions. And again, for me, there really is nothing I would take off the table in the sense of if you got a better idea, let's talk about it. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, let's start with questions.
Yes, good morning, Commissioner, and I do want to first just commend you on the incredible reforms you've made for the adolescents, the agreement to the DOJ, and there's feedback here. How do we stop that?
Here's the other one. Try it now.
I can still hear. I'll just turn it off.
Okay.
Maybe I'll I think I speak loudly enough. Let me try this. Okay, so I do commend you on all of your reforms regarding the adolescents and the 14-point plan. As you've heard, we've heard from a lot of public advocates, we've heard from a lot of legal advocates, we've heard from a lot of public officials that are opposed to this. And I do just have a couple of questions. I'm still really confused as to why enhanced supervision is not an option for inmates transferring out of punitive seg for the 7 days before you put them back in. When we had all those discussions about the enhanced supervision, the need for it, before punitive seg reform, I thought that the purpose was so that we can transfer those truly dangerous there. But now you seem to be saying it's not an option for them, and I don't understand why.
So it still is an option. The question is for somebody who is very seriously assaulted. So it's not, not all, I would say many, I use the term, but a lot of our inmates do go to enhanced supervision, and sometimes go from enhanced supervision to punitive seg. So it's not a one-way process. But somebody who's extremely assaulted, so somebody who's just committed a violent assault, in some cases could have committed that assault in ESH, they just can't be maintained in that housing unit, even with the staffing ratios that we have. So the safest alternative that we currently have would be to put them back in punitive seg. That's the safest alternative. And so when we say dangerous, well, a lot of our inmates are dangerous, meaning they've committed serious crimes, but the propensity for violence is somewhat time limited, meaning depends on when it happened, how frequent and how severe. So that's why we would be reluctant at times to put somebody in enhanced supervision, rather a need to put them back in punitive seg. So there's a degree in that, I guess, that's what I'm trying to say. So if the dangerousness isn't all, we can't just say everybody's dangerous, probably everybody in jail at some level is dangerous.
Commissioner, just to follow up with that. So right now, you do not have the opportunity to return someone to punitive seg during that 7-day interval. In the cases that you're aware of, what has been the experience with people who have committed a violent infraction during that 7-day period? You could not return them to punitive seg. So what did you do with them, and what experience did the prison have, the Rikers have with those people during that 7 days?
All right, so we have some other housing options, some other cell configurations like NIC, Manhattan, that gives some staff additional safety precautions, but still, it doesn't eliminate the fact that staff are going to come into contact with some of these individuals who will sometimes continue to commit additional assaults in those environments. For me, it becomes, at what point is it a liability, since we know there's behavior here, behavior is continuing, that, what is that point to say, okay, this is the best we could do? And for us, at this point, the best we should do is put them back in the highest level of security, which would be, at this point, punitive seg.
Right. No, I'm just trying to focus on what the actual experience has been in the past with people during that 7-day period, if they've had an infraction. If they've committed a violent infraction, you could not return them to punitive seg. And so therefore, what did you do with them, and what effect did that have on prison safety, et cetera?
All right, so again, we can look at individual cases, but typically we'll try to house them in one of these better secure cell blocks. But it's not punitive, and it's not a lockdown unit.
Have those people then committed a second violent infraction?
Some have.
Just to clarify that, Jeff provided us with 2 examples that happened in 1 month.
Right.
So is that on average what it would be? So
I think when we talked about the numbers, and you'll see it, I think we're talking about 20-something in a year.
Yeah, so that's what that's the math.
That example, there were at least 2 examples in the recent months that we highlighted, because we just ended the punitive segregation limitation and then instituted the 7-day. So within that time period, we had 2 instances where they assaulted staff twice.
Just to follow up on the 2 questions, Derek and Steve. So the number, as you see it, would be relatively small. Obviously, one of the concerns is there not be, given the logic of it, a slippery slope and the number start to increase. What are the plans to monitor and count and examine these cases when they occur?
So I believe we'll build monitoring into the rule. I think the board would want that, and we would insist on it. 2, the exceptions are made at a very high level, meaning that it's the chief of the agency who's making these kinds of exceptions, so it's not a group. And the other thing that I think as we talk to advocates and the board is that really defining very specifically who would fall into this category. So it couldn't be expanded. I think those things would be helpful and help us all understand.
Thank you.
So I just one further point of clarification in bringing about this change in the rule, the 7-day variance. We then would potentially be extending the overall length of stay for one period to as much as 60, 67 days.
It extends, yes.
Okay. So the 60-day cap remains in place, the maximum within 6 months, or?
No.
It extends the cap.
It extends that.
It takes it beyond.
It takes. So a question, in the data that you presented to us regarding the 7-day, 20 of the you said 20 people would be sort of eligible for this 7-day override. Of that 20 folks, 14 of them have been designated as Brad H. What have you done before them getting to punitive seg, because all of these folks were in punitive seg, and what could we be doing to define whether or not the behavior that they're exhibiting is in fact contributed to the mental health conditions of them that they're dealing with? That's number one. And number two, I would guess that you would want to demonstrate that there is real violence, right? That these assaults that happened, someone got injured. And in your note in this report to us, it says that the types of injuries that were sustained and to whom, officer injury, UOF on inmate, causing inmate to inmate, or other staff injuries, etc., will be examined. How many of those injuries resulted in staff injuries or a result of an injury because staff used force? So, what's the basis? I'm not getting the real basis for the need for this override.
We can look at all 20 of those cases and give you some detail on each one of them. But typically, staff assaults, use of force is not a staff assault. Typically, use of force could result in a staff being, or staff assault could result in the use of force, but it's typically not something that's hurt in the use of force. It has to be an intention to harm, so that's an assault. The mental screen, again, one of the things we do probably better than any place in the country, and homeless here is inmates don't go to punitive seg if they have mental health conditions, and so we have a pretty elaborate screening process. I think probably better than any place I've ever been to make sure that doesn't happen. So the inmates that we're talking about were those inmates that have already been screened and diverted either to CAPS or PACE or RHU, so they wouldn't be in this category. Not in the category that we're talking about.
So even though they're Brad H.
Right. But the civilian, I don't feel one more time.
14 of the 20 people have Brad H designation, so were they being treated?
Sure, so if we look at everybody who's in punitive segregation or solitary confinement today, that footprint has shrunken dramatically. But if you look, half of those people are on the mental health service. And so those people are, some of them receiving medications, receiving mental health encounters. And so those patients are going to continue to be our patients. And I don't know, I haven't seen this list, I don't know, who it is you're talking about. But I think that generally speaking, wherever people are, whether they're in a solitary confinement setting, GP or MO, we're going to be evaluating them continuously, not just to make sure we're meeting their mental health needs, but also to make the critical decision, do they need to be somewhere else? Do they need to be in MO, in a mental observation unit, or CAPS specifically, or do they need to go to the hospital? So that's our obligation, wherever they are. And I guess I'd be happy to sit down and talk about those patients and go through them if you want.
And I'm raising these questions because I'm wondering why there's not an option for really exploring whether or not these folks belong in CAPS and not in punitive seg.
And that's our job to do before this happens. Really, before somebody gets on a list like this, it's our job in the mental health service to be providing care in the GP setting, to be screening people on intake, and then also when there are problems in the jail, to be looking at patients to see if they need a higher level of care. And so I think that and all of that avoids infractions, avoids a lot of these end outcomes. We also are doing surveillance in these Bing settings and various settings where people are restricted. Our data, as I presented at the last meeting, is that less restrictive settings generally lead to better outcomes for patients who are in the behavioral health service.
If I may just add, just picking up on your point, I believe that what you're really speaking to is when you're talking about such a finite number, is there another alternative? Yes. Is there a better alternative? Is this the only alternative at this time, given the circumstances? I believe that's what you're speaking to.
Absolutely. Right, so I won't speak for Homer, but those inmates have all been screened. If DOH inmates felt that, okay, look, they don't belong here, they need to be housed somewhere else, then they would have been moved. But we can look specifically at that list. And you're right, John, but we need to have another alternative for these very violent inmates that are acting out, that really a treatment model that I don't know anyone that has one. So something we're going to have to develop here.
Can I just follow up on that? Because it sounds to me, what I hear you saying is that there's a class of inmates that are just so dangerous that to prevent, I mean, they've demonstrated their dangerousness in the facility. Punitive SEG is meant to be punitive to address an infraction because we know of the harm, and that's the reason that we've limited it and built in the 7 days. But it sounds like you're saying there's a certain number of inmates that are so dangerous you want to be able to use punitive SEG for security measures to prevent any further violence. Am I correct?
Any continued violence. So it does prevent violence in the sense of the time they're there, but as we've had conversation, it doesn't help us in the long run. So what are we doing in the long run to manage these offenders? So it is the safest option at the time, but the inmate would have to create an infraction. So not like we just house somebody there. They would have to create an infraction in order to get there and have due process.
So is that alternative plan, is that actually underway to come up with another type of unit to manage these persistently violent?
We talked with DOHMH on RHUs, which is a model that we're going to shift away from. I think as we go down that road, then this is, again, a small number of people, but very problematic, that really drive a lot of the incidents and assaults. I think probably Homer could name them off the top of his head. So how do we manage those in a safe way is really a dialogue that we need to have.
Any other questions? Just on a different issue, the visitation. One of the folks that spoke to us talked about a 3-year-old child. You spoke briefly about visitation and how the department encourages children visiting and such. Could you just speak to that as well, particularly the touching issue?
Right. So we will not limit an inmate's ability to hold their child. I think what's more troubling is the length of time it takes people to get to visiting and the processes we put people through. So I think even with the visiting tables, if we could enhance that process in many ways, then the visiting experience is going to get better for everybody. But the waiting of 3 hours, and that's not unusual. So it's something that we admit has to get a lot better as an agency. I'm not sure the last time we actually looked at that as a process. I think the multi-screenings, in some cases 2 or 3 different screenings. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do to enhance visitation, and we do not want to limit somebody's interaction and healthy interaction and supportive pieces that somebody needs when they get back out, because we think that's essential to their ability to get back and function in society. So we support that, and we want to make sure that's as a good of an experience that we can make it, would take into consideration our concerns for security.
Thank you.
Sorry, I did have one further question. Commissioner, with respect to the enhanced supervision and your request to rulemaking to eliminate a due process hearing within the 45 days, is there a particular type of inmate that you're trying to target with that removal of due process? Because what I envision is it could become a little bit like a revolving door, that there could be a placement review hearing, determined that the inmate has satisfied the criteria for discharge, is discharged, and within 45 days is returned without due process. And of course, due process is triggered by all the restrictions in enhanced supervision. So I don't quite understand why you wish to do that.
It's one of those, it's a workload issue. So you get reviewed every 45 days. So the fact that you were released and demonstrate some kind of behavior that's going to get you back, you can get reviewed in 45 days after placement back in there. It is the need to conduct another due process hearing for somebody who's been recently released. It's probably out of all the things we have on our request, probably one that we will have the most dialogue about, because I think there's probably other options we could work on that would be equally effective.
Commissioner, I just had a quick question going back to visitation. You had said that, I guess on average, one visitor a day is arrested when they come to Rikers Island. That's one out of how many approximate visitors per day? Does anybody know that?
I don't know the exact number right now. I'll get that to you then.
We know I don't know the daily numbers.
Yeah, no, I would just be curious if there's a range.
About 2,000.
About 2,000. So 1 out of 2,000. Thank you. Yeah.
To further consider here, separating the two items, first the petition, and I should note for the board that, as we're all aware, we have 60 days to decide to consider. We're nearing that 60 days, so one way or another, the board has to decide this matter. To continue the process, I need a motion on the petition.
I'll move it.
Seconded.
Discussion.
Yes, I have some discussion. I know this has been pending before the board for about 60 days, and there's certainly been a lot of discussion. We all know that pretrial detainees have constitutional right in New York State to contact visits. They're innocent until proven guilty. Court of Appeals has spoken in the case of Cooper v. Moran in 1979. They're pretrial detainees. They're entitled to contact visits of a reasonable duration. It's a fundamental right under New York State Constitution. It's with family and with friends. Security measures can be designed to frustrate the passing of contraband, but they must be reasonable. They must be necessary. And the Department of Correction, in the written proposal, is to redefine the contact visits to a brief embrace at the very beginning and at the very end. For the first time, the Commissioner has mentioned perhaps allowing touch over the 6 inches, but that wasn't part of the written proposal that was before us today. I think it raises, as written, it raises questions as to the constitutionality in terms of whether it would meet the constitutional test for a contact visit, that being a physical visit. Further, in terms of the evidence that's been produced to me, I feel that it's only been demonstrated that there's only been a few cases in which the weapons actually got through to the inmate to where they could be utilized. It seems to me that all these arrests are demonstrating that the process thus far is effective, and it's precluding a lot of contraband from passing in. We know that there's thousands and thousands of inmates, and there's thousands and thousands of visits. It seems to me that when doing a balancing test, that there's going to be tremendous harm caused to many, many, many inmates who are not posing a risk at all, and that harm would outweigh the limited benefit of stopping those few weapons that come through. Not that we want to allow any weapons in, but you have to balance the harm. I also feel that the Department of Correction has the tools now. We have individual regulations. Individual determinations can be made that that inmate is posing a risk of passing contraband, and therefore it can be limited to a booth visit. So in terms of the visiting, I would certainly find that it hasn't satisfied my inquiry as to it being necessary. In terms of the punitive SEG rollback, Certainly the commissioner has explained the very narrow cases in which he wishes to use it. He's exploring other options to develop. There are tools available. There's red ID, there's maximum custody for those very limited, and I have deep concerns about it being a slippery slope and being extended. We also know there's great harm that accrues from prolonged isolated confinement, which is clear that we can start getting into months. And the enhanced supervision to eliminate due process. I realize it's burdensome for the department, but it's very restrictive enhanced supervision. There's only out of cell for 7 hours a day. I could see how that could result in a revolving door, and the restrictions trigger the due process. The fact that there could be a determination that the person is no longer a danger to the extent that they need to be in enhanced supervision can be sent out for 45 days, and within that be sent back without due process would essentially reverse the placement hearing determination, which I don't think would be fair. I don't think it's narrowly drawn. In terms of the variances, some of them are misstated. They don't include the conditions. We've gotten dozens and dozens of comments here and dozens of letters, including by public officials, several by the city council, the public advocate, legal advocates, all essentially in opposition to this petition as drafted as having an insufficient, legitimate evidentiary basis and opposed in law and or fact. My thoughts are that it's premature. And it's not necessary. And there's been a lot of discussions over the last 60 days, and it's regrettable that none of those considerations were put in an amended petition. I am of the opinion that at this time it's misguided and that it would be much better to wait for the implementation of the Department of Justice conditions, the settlement that's going to include a reform of inmate discipline, that's going to include a review of due process across the board by an outside consultant. I'm also of the opinion that VERA is in there right now looking at all the segregation units. They're certainly of the opinion that segregation units cause and breed violence. I don't think the department has shown that there's sufficient change circumstances based on a legitimate evidentiary basis, and that the department in fact currently does have the tools, although I understand why the department might want broader reach. We have enhanced supervision. We have very clear regs that allow individual inmates to have restricted visits. That's currently in place, the 60-day override in all of these administrative units. So for all those reasons, I am opposed and will feel constrained to vote against the petition.
I agree with many of your points, Judge. And I listened to Jennifer and the coalition, and I listened to what the council members wrote yesterday. But I also listened to the spirit of reform that this commissioner has shown. I listened to Martha talk about, I've been on the board almost 15 years. I listened to Martha talk about how this administration, this city council, this speaker are committing dollars to this organization, are committing dollars, unbelievable dollars to the Department of Correction to continue the reform agenda. Nothing's perfect. I think your points are well placed. And I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to vote in favor of this stuff. Thank you.
Other comments?
Yes. Michael, I agree with you, I think, and with Martha's statement, I think we have an administration now who has committed to the vision of really reforming Rikers, making sure that all voices are heard, being very progressive in terms of doing what's right and doing what's necessary to both hold people accountable and be supportive of people. And I think that rulemaking is something that is very special for this body to engage in and for the department to engage in. And based on what we've heard what I've heard over the last month and a half and what we've been hearing today really doesn't justify us going into rulemaking for those various items. For one, around punitive segregation, I don't feel like there's enough that we have done or could do to really give the department, or the department already has the tools necessary to deal with the issues of violence for people who are in punitive segregation. I feel like there's a set of data that's in front of us that we could look at to do some different things that won't infringe on that. Visits. I'm part of the visit work group. We have a visit work group that's working together to look for alternative ways to both enhance the visit and to stop contraband from coming in. I agree. Our jails need to be safe. People should not be bringing contraband in, and if that's happening, they need to be held accountable. But there are ways in which we can do that without infringing on the many, many visitors who come to see their loved ones in our jails. The packages seem like an issue that's going to go away as soon as the uniforms are implemented. There won't be clothes that'll be delivered because people will be in uniforms unless it's suits for court. So that issue is really going away. I just don't see at this particular point a justification to go into rulemaking to deal with the issues put forth to the board. I think there are alternative ways of doing that, and we ought to seek those alternative ways before we go into rulemaking. Thank you.
Other comments?
Yes. I recognize and applaud the department's efforts on reform of solitary confinement. It is you set a national bar. It's not high enough, but it's extraordinary, and you should be more than congratulated. You've done a spectacular job on this, and there's more to come. And everybody in this room has been part of that process, and the city has led it. We've tried to be helpful on that. But I speak against this petition. In January, the board voted with the support of the department to limit the consecutive days a detainee could remain in solitary to 30 days. This decision was a reform, although the international standard, the Mandela rules, which represent an international United Nations standard on how to treat people in prisons, recognizes the harm, the danger of solitary confinement, says it shouldn't be used at all on adolescents who are mentally ill, and should be limited to 15 days for others. And the reason is because of the harm of solitary confinement. Today, we are being asked to roll back part of that decision. And it could result in up to 60 days or more of people being in solitary confinement. A prolonged solitary confinement is universally understood as a torturous procedure, and I do not think the Board of Corrections should reopen this question ever, and certainly not at this point. We put in the 7-day break because we wanted to mitigate the harm caused by 30 days of solitary confinement. And that was the right thing to do, and there is no reason for us to change it. I've certainly heard nothing today to suggest that the department does not have the tools available to manage this population. Among the people who they've talked about, who they've asked for, are people whose behavior have thousands of days of solitary confinement. Solitary confinement does nothing to their behavior. It doesn't make them better. It doesn't make the facility safer. The department has to manage these people, and I trust them to do that. But the use of solitary confinement is not the way to do that. That only causes increased harm. We have already debated, investigated, reviewed the scientific and other information regarding. In this case not scientific, but review the policies on packages and visits. Previously, the board has carefully considered these issues and rejected department requests for us to limit access to visits based upon some very complex intelligence process. We've rejected that. I find the visit, the proposed visit policy extremely disturbing. The notion that, although we've heard a slight modification on that today, that people are going to get 2 hugs and then not be able to touch each other for the visit. more than disturbing, it's very upsetting to me. And I've sat and watched visitation. People should be holding their families and their friends. It's about touching. And the department, you know, I mean, everything the department is doing is good, but this doesn't make sense. And it will, I believe, that it's offensive. It's bad policy. It stigmatizes the families and friends of these men and women. It will increase violence, and it will increase tension in the city. It's a bad idea. There are actions that the city and DOC can take to address the crisis and culture of violence on Rikers Island. We on the board, I know will, and I know the department also will support the efforts of Steve Martin, the new appointed monitor under Nunez. The city just signed a consent agreement recognizing that there's been a culture of violence on Rikers Island that's been going on for many, many years, and agreed to a series of rules to restrict violent behavior directed against prisoners. And I'm very glad that they did that, and I know that they will support Mr. Martin, who is a national leader in corrections, who's familiar with New York City and its jails. That will make a tremendous amount of difference. I think the city should be working with the courts and the police to eliminate these short stays that the commissioner referred to. I mean, if there are thousands of people on any given day who are just going to be spending a day or 2 or 3 on Rikers Island, they shouldn't be there in the first place. And if they weren't there, the department would have more staff to handle its responsibilities, including providing due process to people. And Commissioner, I'm sure it's a workload issue, but I'm sure you don't mean that providing people with due process is something which we dispense of because there's a workload. I know you don't feel that way, and I wish your staff would be more supportive on that one. Most importantly, however, we need to reduce the population of people in the Department of Correction. There are about 10,000 right now. There shouldn't be that many. There is no need for there to be a massive prison island in New York City for pretrial detention and often effectively financial punitive detention of people who can't afford bail. So our goal and the city's goal should be to close down Rikers Island. In the meantime, I urge the board to reject the petition. Thank you.
If I may, Chair. I came to this board like the other board members appointed, but I think it's important for everyone to appreciate that most of us, if not all of us, act with independent minds. And when I joined this board, the first board meeting that I attended, we had a vote on rulemaking concerning the SHU. And at that board meeting, I shared with those in attendance that having served as a lawyer and an advocate both within government and outside of government, I understand and I appreciate well the competing concerns and challenges that individuals on the outside, out of concern for those on the inside, meaning at Rikers Island and other jails, the concerns, the challenges that we all experience and we feel. But I also understand and appreciate that it's a big challenge to run a large system such as the New York City Corrections Department. And that comes with its own challenges and competing concerns. I'll add that there is no easy answer, there are no easy solutions to the questions that are being presented, the petitions that have been brought forward. What I did find when we engaged in rulemaking concerning the SHU and punitive segregation is that what resulted over a period of about 60 days was a very thoughtful, rigorous, involved, and aggressive process where members of the board came together, heard from people on the outside, and worked with the Department of Correction, who was very willing to engage, to try to reach certain solutions that addressed many of the competing concerns. Not every decision that was reached was agreed to by all, and every day we will see whether or not the decisions we will make are the right ones or better ones could have been made. What I learned from that process is that through rulemaking, we can address many of these issues. What I found was that there were many questions that I had that were answered during that process. Questions remain for me about visitation. Questions remain about the 7-day variance. Many questions remain about due process. I believe that through rulemaking, we can get to those answers and we can resolve them in a way that we need to. And so as an independent, I'm willing to go into rulemaking to have these conversations and try to move. In part because what I've seen, what I've read, what I've explored when visiting Rikers is that there are people there trying to make very important reforms. And what I've seen on the outside with the advocates is that people are equally concerned about what is happening. And I believe that through this process, we can continue moving forward.
So with regard to the petition for rulemaking, I'm going to support that because I think that we do need to start the CAPA process. I support it because I think that we need to get the process begun, not because I have any real agreement with the substantive provisions of the petition. I think I agree with a lot of what has been said today. I think their petition does require a significant amount of revision, and based upon our reaction with the interactions we've had thus far with the commissioner and his staff, I'm confident that we will be able to make the various types of revisions that we've been discussing. And I support the petition for rulemaking on that basis, that it will be revised and revised significantly between today and when we put it to a final vote. Are we commenting now on the 7-day variance as well, or are we just commenting on?
People are doing what they
People do what they want
to do. This
Okay.
is a very free-spirited organization.
Well, then I move to comment on the 7-day variance as well, which I think I am not inclined to support, because what I would like to see there is, maybe we can take it up again next month, but hopefully what I'd like to see there is some more thought given to alternatives to returning a person back to punitive segregation, particularly in view of the fact that after having served 30 days, it seems to me that there is a significant need, a significant benefit to an inmate who's been in punitive seg for 30 days to have the 7-day break, given the difficulties, or rather given the problems that we've heard, that we understand it's the causes that are caused to inmates who are in punitive segregation for a prolonged period of time. So in terms of the petition, I support moving that forward and beginning the CAPA process. In terms of the variance for the 7-day gap, I'm disinclined to support that. I think we need to reconsider that maybe next month, find better alternatives during that time period.
I'm going to support it based on what Jennifer and Derek said. I'm not going to repeat what they said, but I'm going to underline what Derek said about the 7-day variance. It's the piece of what's being proposed that needs to really be discussed. I think Homer's responses to some of the questions about mental health evaluation miss the point that you cannot be floridly mentally ill and still have mental health issues, that this will only worsen. So I think of all the issues, it's the one that does disturb me the most, and I think perhaps best discussed as part of this process.
First, I want to say that this context needs to be reviewed, thought about, relative to the fact that we are very fortunate in New York City to have, as the leader of the Department of Corrections, such an engine, a driver for reform by any standard, a national bar against the absolutes of where public policy and humane treatment point. This is an exceptional leader, and his record of achievement, his record of progress is extraordinary. And part of my thinking about these and related issues has to stem from that. When someone so clearly, with a strong track record, says that in order to continue to move the agenda, in order to assure the achievement of the goals, in order to assure the safety of the institution, and that means the safety of the inmates, the uniformed staff, and other staff, that starts with a great deal of force for me. In addition, I think this is a very unique kind of process in government. That is, that the initiation of the process is really the start of substantive review, deliberation, analysis, discussion, and negotiation, so that the end product gets the benefit of that process. Very unusual in the setting of rules, even where public participation is engendered in the process. It is often decided behind closed doors, rather narrowly considered. This process, especially with this board and with this commissioner, is richer and fuller, more all-encompassing, and gives every reason to believe that the conclusion will have a better, more focused, more refined, more effective outcome. I also support the emergency variance. Frankly, I believe that the need for this change is a product of some fault in the first process, because it is frankly illogical to have a set of penalties, punitive segregation, with a period, no matter what happens, you cannot impose an additional penalty. Nobody would have contemplated that, in my view, at the outset. Written into the original language should have been, by any logical, common sense test, some ability to alter within very limited circumstances. And the projected numbers speak to that. The 2 a month, the 28 or 30 a year. Now, that's been used as an argument that says, well, it can't be that significant in terms of potential violence or harm to safety. But the truth is, it should be turned on its head. Why should there be any opportunity on the basis of the technical language that exposes other inmates or staff to violence? I appreciate and support the drive, the moral imperative of limiting segregation, limiting punitive segregation. I too regard it as counterproductive. But to the degree it is used as a tool, we shouldn't be stupid about it. And the obligation to the safety of inmates, corrections officers, other staff, argues very strongly to support the commissioner on this. My earlier question was focused on the obvious risk when you tighten controls of this kind, and that is that in the discretionary or the process of judgment that the number expands. That would not be good. The definition has to be tightly constructed the judgments have to be visible and monitored and evaluated. But with that caveat, I will support the emergency variance request as well. If that concludes the discussion, I would look to, I don't know who's in there. Take care of yourself.
Just one more comment. Today is Bastille Day. The next board meeting is in 2 months. In between that is August. Having lived through the last 60-day thing, that was a terrible process. Well, it was a terrible process because it was extremely. It was too rushed. It made no sense at all. It was the chances of making lots of mistakes were high, and the reason that happened was because at the time the city came in and said this is what we want to do. They set the schedule for the hearing and for this and for that, and everything to happen within 60 days. I strongly urge my colleagues right now not to let ourselves be forced into that kind of situation again. We need the kind of deliberation that Jennifer described, and that's going to take some time. It's not going to take forever, but even though we're back here again inappropriately talking about rulemaking, we should at least do it effectively and judiciously. And not under a timeline which does not respect our needs. So I just want to say that right now, and I hope that we can get the support from the city not to be forced into a inappropriate rush towards rulemaking.
Aptly stated. So may I ask for someone to call the question, please? First on
call them separate.
On the petition first.
Move the item?
Yeah, I second
it. We've had discussion, so that's already happened, actually. So this is just calling the question.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor signify by raising your hand.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? The motion carries. Can I get a motion on the variance?
Move the item.
Second.
All those in favor? 2, 3, 4. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. The motion does not carry. We're going to continue with the agenda. Let me see let's do the updates from the departments, and then we'll do your report. So let's start with BOC update, unless it's all been covered. Nothing? The Department of Health and Mental Health update?
Sure, so just 2 quick updates, and I'll make the first one for the sake of somebody who has to run out. But as you all know, we're making a transition in the health service from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene over to the Health and Hospitals Corporation. And so one of the things I wanted to point out and announce is that the Health and Hospitals Corporation and the president and the board have identified Dr. Patsy Yang, who's standing over here as the senior vice president. So she's going to be leading us really to form a new division, which is the first time this has happened in quite some time at HHC. And so broadly speaking, the DOHMH staff, about 250 of us, will migrate over to HHC in August, at the end of the first week in August. And then later, at the end of the calendar year, as the Horizon contract comes to its end, those staff then will be reviewed and incorporated into what will be, for the first time really in a long time, since 2 of you up there were in the health service, not having an oversight team and a care team, but having one single care team that's in a mission-driven organization. And so those are the broad strokes. There's many details to be worked out, but I wanted to point out Dr. Yang and also just to give a quick update on that. The only other update I wanted to pass along is, I think as Commissioner Pont referenced, that crisis intervention teams are going to be rolling out in a few weeks. Last time we were here together, we talked about the pre-arraignment screening, where we've been seeing people in Manhattan and doing not only better triage of the people who are going to jail, but also identifying people that could potentially be diverted away from jail. That process is continuing, and about a third of the people in pre-arraignment screening who we see are actually being seen by a nurse practitioner, and all those contacts then are potentials either for better triage when people get to jail or diversion away from jail. So that process we hope to expand. Inside the jails, Department of Correction and DOHMH sent a team to Minnesota, to the Barbara Schneiderman Foundation several weeks ago to learn CIT, basic CIT training protocols. We'll be the first big jail in the country to use CIT teams. They're used, many of you know them from the police using them, and also a few state BOCs, but really no jails. So that team went, a joint team of health and security staff. They've come back. They now will be our train the trainers group, and we'll be using live models, be using protocols that we adapted from the Barbara Schneiderman Foundation, and by the end of this month we'll be rolling out our first CIT team in AMKC. And I just want to point out why this is so crucial. We were in the PACE and CAPS units with Dr. Yang the other day, and those are places that both agencies have put together to provide much better care for people who are sick, who need it. But one thing, if you talk to those officers there, they will tell you is they can do a great job caring for patients, but there still are problems on the units. And so right now, today, still, if they can't solve a problem themselves, the only support they have, the only option they really have is a probe team, which is an escalating response. So that it puts tremendous pressure on the officers, whether they're in a GP setting or in an MO setting or even in a PACE or CAPS unit, to handle it themselves or suffer the consequences of not handling it themselves. So the CIT teams, when they roll out, will be the first time in this jail system we have come up with a joint security and health response that's top to bottom, focused on de-escalating and resolving without leading to uses of force, without leading to infractions, without punishing people for having a bad day or a bad response to an individual problem. So that'll be at the end of this month, and we're really thrilled about then rolling out the CIT teams to every jail that has a mental observation unit in it, and having that capacity 24/7, so that if you're in a jail with an MO and there's a problem, that we're not calling a probe team. The first thing we're doing is calling a CIT team, so that'll be very soon. And those are the only two updates I have.
Any questions? Yes. In the MO units right now, if there is a planned use of force, are mental health staff always involved prior to the use of force?
So, particularly in a mental observation unit, the policy is that a mental health staff will be called, they'll come to the area, work to de-escalate, and then we don't want them to be actually part of the use of force. However, there are circumstances where if a planned use of force happens, if it's planned an hour before and it's going to occur at a time where we don't have mental health staff in the building, we may struggle to get people there on time. Also, the whole notion of having mental health staff there before a use of force is to help de-escalate. But the fact is, when a use of force is planned, when everybody knows, when the patient inside the cell knows, and when the security staff know that a probe team is going to be called, to ask a mental health person to come in and create a different outcome in that scenario is really an uphill climb. And so that's why these CIT teams are absolutely required, so that we can so that the mental health staff can help de-escalate, knowing that there's more de-escalation help on the way. Not that we have a mental health clinician there to stave off this huge escalating response that the patient and the security staff both are preparing for.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to our committee report from the Ad Hoc Adolescent and Young Adult Committee.
Okay, well, we have really, really good news in this department, notwithstanding the fact I might disagree with the commissioner on his petition on rulemaking. I certainly commend his incredible efforts and successes regarding our adolescents, and it will be coming to our young adults as well. He's put together a terrific team that include Chief Perino, Warden Collins, Deputy Commissioner Wynette Saunders. We all meet essentially weekly. He very much listens to his advisory board, and this has been a process where we've been working together to implement these reforms. As most of you know, the city has tentatively agreed to the proposed settlement with the Department of Justice and the Nunez lawyers that was preliminarily approved by the judge on July 10th. There'll be a fairness hearing that's going to be scheduled on October 21st, and therefore this proposed settlement could in fact become effective on October 21st. We know it's very broad sweeping, and to the Commissioner's credit, the city's credit, they've really committed to really broad sweeping reforms for Rikers that include generally all the inmates and very specifically some for the 16 to 18-year-olds. It includes improved training, staffing, cameras, use of force policy, programming. It includes alternative disciplinary system for our youth. It includes due process review by an outside consultant. It includes reforming inmate discipline, management and housing and programming plan for adolescents and young adults. It includes de-escalation confinement area, the special unit inside the TRU. It includes a monitoring compliance, including the federal monitor, and very much, which is real music to my ears, is it includes really using their best efforts to try to move the 16 and 17-year-olds off of Rikers, which is an adult jail. In terms of the Board of Correction regulations, there's a lot underway this year with respect to the young adults, which include the 18-year-olds. By August 1st, the department shall provide to the board a plan regarding age-appropriate programming. The department, the committee, my committee will be reviewing that and in discussion with the commissioner and his team, and then it will be presented to the full board in September. By October 15th, the regs call that there be housing units that are set up for 18 to 21-year-olds, the young adult. And what I've learned recently is that the department at this point, depending on its financial feasibility, is planning on incorporating all those conditions that are applicable through the DOJ settlement because they wish to house the 18 to 21-year-olds together. That would mean voluntarily agreeing to utilize all of those conditions for our young adults 19 to 21 years of age, which is really quite extraordinary because it's not required, but obviously the commissioner knows that's better. It's the same sort of arguments in terms of the neuroscience. And then the plan is still to end punitive seg and enhanced supervision for our young adults 21 and under by January. It appears that the city is well on its way to doing that. We've got a new pilot housing program that I understood started yesterday. It's in GMDC. It's called GMDC Summer Success. It's pilot for the young adults. It will include up to 40 youth, 10 18s, 10 19s, 10 20-year-olds, and 10 21s. There'll be 20 on each side in this housing unit. They will be required, and they only go in if they're accepted because they're agreeing to attend school, vocational training. They could get various certifications, CPR, food safety, OSHA. They must remain infraction-free. And there will be some benefits. They can earn up to $25 per week. They can get some increased benefits, like increased visiting, perhaps on designated weekends, some extended lockout time so they can lock in later. And the other great piece of news is that the city and the department has instituted an incentive program for our adolescents. It's called Adolescents Striving for Change. The adolescents have to sign a contract. They can earn, and they're promising certain behaviors. They can earn up to $25, which they can spend in the commissary. The staff, I've been there to speak to the young people. The staff are really excited about it. The young people are really excited about it. Obviously, it's just commenced, so we think it's an extremely promising incentive program. So I think with respect to adolescents and young adults, we have a lot of great news. We'll have a lot of work that we'll be doing this year, and hopefully all this will be fully implemented by next year. Any questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you. Sam?
brings us to the close of the business items on the agenda. There is a provision for additional posts. Oh, there's still another list. We have a few individuals for what is the usual public comment period. Nick Clackheed, if I have that name pronounced correctly, from the Sylvia Rivera Law Program or Project.
Good morning. Thank you. I apologize. I thought I was signing up to speak before the rulemaking actually occurred, but I'm going to make my comments all the same in the spirit that we're going to be improving what was proposed and just passed. So I hope that my comments can go towards the decision-making process and how we alter what was just decided upon. My name is Mick Kincaid. I'm the director of the Prisoner Justice Project at the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, and I just wanted to add my voice to those who are concerned about this recent rulemaking proposal. And I'm going to focus specifically on visitation issues. So to begin with, I find that there is not sufficient evidence to ground this proposal at all. Allegedly, these changes in visitation are being done to address violence within the jail system. However, serious restrictions to visitation run the risk of actually increasing this violence. There's many studies, most currently from the Vera Institute, that have shown that adults who have strong relationships with loved ones fare better in prisons and jails. They have increased mental health wellness, they have increased participation in programming, they receive less disciplinary tickets. And they are less likely to return to the system once they are finally released. Likewise, young people with strong visitation receive less disciplinary tickets, they perform better in the school programs, and they generally report higher levels of mental health wellness as well. And the Sylvia Rivera Law Project works exclusively with transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex individuals, and I know that for them, visits from a loved one, which is a category that doesn't necessarily just reflect legal family, can provide someone with the strength to continue to live throughout another day. When we think about the strip searches, the path frisks, the humiliation that trans and gender nonconforming and intersex people go through in the jails and the prisons, a visit from a loved one, a visit from someone who actually understands that experience and who can respond to them affirmatively gives them the strength to keep going. I fail to see how restricting visits can in any way decrease violence when it's actually just a lifeline of support and affirmation for someone. The rulemaking petition also suggests that the barriers to touching, the intrusive multiple level scanning, and the additional screening requirements such as having a criminal background check, which we still don't know when exactly that would happen in the process, how far in advance one would have to apply to get screened for that, would it assist in reducing contraband to the jails. But there's no evidence that the contraband that's introduced during visits is a major problem, more so than the contraband that's already coming in through civilian staff or uniformed guards. You already know this, but there are reports that the Board of Correction already did in April that concluded that only around 10% of the items used in fights were brought in through visits. And the New York City Department of Investigation in 2014 stated that the majority of contraband came in through uniformed guards and civilian employees. So I just don't see how penalizing the people who are coming there to visit and showing support and love for people who are inside would help to reduce this. I also want to add that the majority of people within the New York City jail system are there for far too short of a time, and they move far too frequently to establish these long-term relationships with the uniformed guards or the civilian employees that would be necessary to prove that they're receiving the right kind of visits, or that they that their visit is meaningfully appropriate because of the person isn't necessarily a legal family member. There's just not enough time to establish those relationships or to even put in for those processes. When we know that visits are generally a source of grounding, of love, and relationship building within the community that people return to, it doesn't make any sense to begin from the position that a visit must be shown to be acceptable. We should begin from the position that all visits are great and go, any negative thing needs to come from that positive position. And I think that this rulemaking petition flips that on its head. It just consists of drastic measures that would serve only to humiliate visitors and separate loved ones and keep already vulnerable populations from visiting their loved ones. And specifically, I'm thinking about people who don't have immigration statuses. I'm thinking about people who already have criminal convictions who want to visit their loved ones who are also inside. And then also, of course, LGBTQ people who are visiting. We already heard from Ms. Kelsey DeVilla about what it is like as a visitor to go through that process, to have someone put their hand down your bra, to have asked to be open your pants. That increases with people who are gender nonconforming, with people whose gender ID on their on their state ID doesn't match their presentation. These are things that keep people from visiting, and they keep the people who are inside from actually experiencing that love and affirmation. I really hope that the rulemaking petition at the end of this deliberation period looks drastically different than what was just passed, because it doesn't seem to be grounded in any type of evidence, and doesn't seem to be further in any of the causes of reducing violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Japley.
Thank you. Hi, I am Chris Japley. I'm a member of JAC, and I'm also a Quaker. I speak as a Quaker. JAC has sat down with Commissioner Pont 3 times this year. He's been very generous with his time. However, he's drowning in the nightmare that is Rikers. It can't be fixed. Close it. I wrote that down before I heard Robert Cohen also say close Rikers. It is an idea that we must work with. We must be brave. We can do big and meaningful things. It is not Commissioner Pont's fault that Rikers is as bad as it is, and it is impossible for him to repair it in spite of the fact that he is a very skillful person. No one can fix up Rikers. It is beyond repair. It is a shame on all New Yorkers that Rikers exists as it now exists. I'm somewhat modifying the words of writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, who said that the death of Khalif Browder is to be blamed on all New Yorkers. Rikers' condition is to be blamed on all New Yorkers. It is also racist and abuses males of color and primarily black males, but also brown males. Commissioner Pont said this morning, everybody who is in jail is potentially dangerous, which was, I don't think he really meant to say that, but actually it is sadly true, because Rikers doesn't help the majority of the inmates. It makes them more mentally ill and more vicious. We need to close Rikers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lillian Rivera Matos.
Yes. Oh, gosh. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Miss Lillian Rivera Matos. I just got married June 22nd in KC. It's very difficult what I'm going to say today, but I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a community activist, a former judicial delegate nominated twice, and what I've been subjected to by some COs at Rikers Island goes beyond horrendous. On June 27, I was violated with a dirty glove. On July 1st, I asked a CO by the number 17735, which she had violated me also in March, and by surrounding me in my wheelchair with Officer Ward, and telling me that if I didn't hurry up and get dressed, I was going to be thrown in jail. On July 1st, back to June 27th, I had numerous complaints against CO Ward, and it seemed like it was swept underneath the carpet. I was told by Deputy Commissioner Blake that he had warned Ward and Bell, because Bell was the first one that actually sent me home for 45 days based on an allegation that I had cursed her out, which was totally untrue, because on that day, April 24th, I was having a private conversation with a lady trying to emphasize to her that it was a process and she had to wait, and I was called by Officer Bell for me to go to the front, and I was told by CO Ruff that what was going on between Bell and I stated nothing is going on, and she stated, Ruff stated to me, well, Mr. Rivera, she's stating that you disrespected her, and on that day, I didn't even speak to this lady, I didn't even look at her. I was sent home. I was told by professional and ethical officer Wood that I could come back the following day. The following day I came, and I was addressed by an Officer Gray, very disrespectfully. She started to create a scenario. Then I spoke to Officer Knight, and she asked me to tell her what was going on. I briefly stated to her what was going on, and she said, I don't know, I wasn't there, can I help you? And then she went to the office and gave me a piece of paper, 45 days. Then Officer Gray stated to me that if I don't hurry up and leave, I would get arrested. It's always intimidation, it's always fabrication, it's always he said, she said, and I'm too grown for that. I go there to visit my husband, at that time my fiance, and just do that. It's bad enough that I can't even be processed like everybody else. It's like you're gonna ring, go, and get checked. It's always something with these ladies, you know. They're so disrespectful. I've gone through enough pain and agony. Since I got married, I only seen my husband for 2 hours. Since I got married June 22nd, they sent me home July 3rd because I disrespected an officer. I am a lady. I do not disrespect anyone. This is something that has created, and they've created scenarios against me. They're falsifying records, stating that this and this and that. I don't go to Rikers Island to be labeled a stereotype. I go to Rikers Island for one thing, and it's to see my husband, which I truly, truly love. He's been transferred all over the place, from AMKC to BBC to Brooklyn Detention. He's gone through a lot. He's been targeted. He's been humiliated. He's a detainee. I love him very much, and all I want to do is be able to spend time with my husband that I truly love. I've written a letter to the best of my ability. I don't have a good mindset right now. I'm going through a great deal of turmoil based on individuals that are supposed to be professional, and all they're doing is using me as a scapegoat, and I want the abuse to stop. They restricted for 90 days. Captain Skype is a lady, no, it's a woman that, for whatever her reasons, she has a lot of hate towards me. And the reason why I say that is because each and every time, when I first introduced myself to her, she stated, and I quote, "Oh, you're the one that's been testifying before the board," you know, and it makes my life a living hell. She was the one that stated to me that I had to leave for no reason, because there was one officer that kept antagonizing me and making statements like, "You're frustrated because you had to wait outside." It's crazy what goes on. I just wanted to stop. This is a living nightmare. It's bad enough that I was subjected to a dirty glove going into my private parts. There's consequences of that. I've seen the doc. I had to get an HIV test. Come on, just leave me alone, please. I just want to be left alone. Okay, I haven't done anything. And I apologize for getting emotional, but I am a human being. I just want to be left alone. I want my name to be cleared. I do not disrespect people. This is not the way. This is not me. Commissioner, please, would you truly investigate what's going on for them to leave me alone? Please. Enough is enough now. Thank you for listening to me. And another issue is, I've gotten numerous complaints about the mail. My husband I sent him a letter May 1st. He got it the 29th of May. There's been a lot of people calling me up. Yes, I am an activist. And yes, I get results. And yes, I am angry, but I'm angry in a passive way because I also want to bring change to Rikers Island because I've seen too many injustices. And I'm not only speaking on behalf of myself, I'm speaking on all others that are not aware of what's going on. They're not aware of the civil rights, civil liberties. And you know what? There needs to be reform as far as to what happened to me. I want everyone to look at this, of what happened to me. Who do I go to and tell them what's going on with me other than the board? I don't have no disrespect. I know that you're going to do everything humanly possible, so I'll be exonerated because right now I feel like if I've committed a crime and I haven't committed a crime. Why so much hate towards me? And another issue that I would like to bring to the table is the fact that I saw on July 3rd people with disabilities in a hospital setting being abused. And what I mean by abused is if they're shackled already, if they're handcuffed, and they're obviously sick because they're in the hospital, then why put the shackles tighter? I saw this firsthand, and I don't think it's right. As a disability activist that I am, I don't think it's right, and I think that is something that you have to look into it. Commissioner, I just want to emphasize to you that I don't have anything against you, that I know that you have a lot on your plate, and when I spoke to you briefly, I stated to you that I would be by your side and try to do as much as I can, whatever I could do to assist you. But Rikers Island needs to be reformed in every aspect of the way because abuse is abuse no matter what type of form. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Liz Mayer. Liz Mayer.
Good morning. My name is Liz Mayers. I'm a member of the Jails Action Coalition, and I'm pleased to be a member of the Visit Work Group, trying to fix the long-running and tenacious problems that plague the visiting process at Rikers. As I talk some more, I just want you to know I think that the visiting process is, in a way, perhaps a metaphor or a match for what goes on within Rikers. To visit a loved one at Rikers means suffering a demeaning and alienating experience that no one would endure if not for the compelling need to see and hold a friend or family member locked away at Rikers Island. So you can imagine how we have welcomed the opportunity to work with members of the department on improving the visiting experience for the thousands of individuals who come to visit Rikers jails each year, and we really are working together. It's only been a few weeks and we've already had a few meetings. The working group has met twice and also been given an excellent and thorough tour of the visit center in the visit area of RNDC, where 16 and 17-year-olds are housed. The establishment of the working group has made me feel that change is possible. There are many things that need to be fixed, beginning with an effort to communicate with the visiting public in a way that will be perceived as helpful and even welcoming. However, in the past, this has seemed to be of little interest to the department. So in each of our meetings, we would point out the need for signs to guide rather than scold or threaten visitors who would not necessarily know what the correction officers know after years of working at the facility. We would make it clear that fingerprinting, if it must be done, is not mandatory. These changes, in tandem with often disrespectful responses to questions, make visitors feel, as they often say, they are not wanted there. I know this is not true since department officials have said many times how well they understand the enormous importance of contact between incarcerated people and family and friends. Unfortunately, this recognition is not communicated to those who take the time and make the effort to come to the jails. There are so many ways to welcome visitors. Of course, the word welcome may sound weird, being so far outside of the prison vocabulary. But it is not so hard to accomplish if one thinks about it as customer service rather than a burden to be put up with. For example, clear and helpful signs and openness to answer questions help to alleviate the anxiety that takes hold when entering an extremely opaque and complicated setting. Such small but powerful messages can change the perception that a visit is an us and them experience. I have found that correction personnel in our meetings are interested in making such changes, and we are grateful for their willingness to focus on this area. For example, one captain suggested putting an information booth with a big sign at the front of the center before a visitor enters the seemingly endless series of surveillance machinery. I'm sorry I sound this way. I'm very emotional about this. This focus may sound trivial when compared to the many problems that need to be fixed, such as interminable waits and intrusive inspections. But hopefully they point to a change in attitude away from the idea that every visitor is a likely contraband carrier, which the Board of Corrections' own report refutes, to the recognition that only a tiny percentage of visitors are criminals. In closing, I would like to add my voice to those who are taken aback at the idea that visitors, once they have arrived at the place where they will see their family members, can only briefly embrace them at the beginning and end of a visit. Such a rule will wipe out any changes that can be made in the effort to welcome visitors, and it must be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that brings us to the conclusion of our business. Thank you to our board members for your participation. Thank all of you for coming. We are adjourned.